Well, thanks for having me back to BIMnet. As you say, I'm David Philp. I'm head of BIM at the UK BIM Task Group and also BIM Director for Europe, Middle East, Africa and India at AECOM, which I think is good, isn't it? You know, to actually be helping try and prescribe it, but also doing it at the same time and trying to understand some of these real challenges we've got as an industry. So I don't really have any agenda for you today, but it's kind of look back in terms of this thing called Level 2 BIM. You know, we've been on a real journey, I think, as an industry for the last 4 years. You know, where have we got to, you know, what does it look in terms of what's next? And it'd be good to get some audience participation today in terms of, if you can guess what slide is next, it could be quite good fun as well. But, you know, it's a real important time, I think, in terms of our journey. I think in terms of UK and BIM as well. By the summer of this year, the whole Level 2 package can be complete in terms of processes and the tools. And for me, that starts to get us, you know, to that starting line. You know, everybody talks about this thing called 2016, a government mandate, as if it's that end. For me, it's a start. It's the start of a journey. It lasts with all these tools and processes that we can start to configure to actually achieve something in terms of this thing called Level 2 BIM maturity. And I think if anything we've seen over the last couple of years, you know, you look at it, you know, if anything BIM's done, it started to create a great conversation with industry. I mean, you look at tonight, a lovely night like this, okay, maybe there's some free beer in the room to help entice, but you know, we're talking about different things. We're talking about BIM, we're talking about industry change, we're talking about virtualization. And if you look back about 4 years ago, how many folk have been talking about things such as soft landings, starting to think about operation, starting to think more and more about procurement rooms? I think BIM's helped us sort of polarize our thinkings on a few things. And that's been the elephant in the room. It's been very much about change. I'm quite lucky, you know, you get to travel, you get to see a bit of the world, and we've been out in New Zealand probably a couple of years ago looking at the rebuild in Canterbury, and we're just back, and one of the guys showed us, you know, I said, hey, you want to see what we're doing? And there's a wee short video here if you want to run it. It was across in Wellington. It was one of the guys from, Wellington Council showed us, you know, what they're doing. Okay, you know, a bit of virtualization, you know, great, fantastic. But then, you know, it was some of the data that kind of sat behind this model that kind of wowed me, you know, typical sunny day sort of there, it does get to it. But, you know, they've got some big challenges out there, you know, the SIT potential in terms of, you know, seismic sort of potential. They've got to run multiple sort of scenario planning. So for them, this whole model environment is really quite important. They're starting to think a bit very much in terms of, oops, it's all right. This is where they're starting to bring in some of their infrastructure. You know, we often think of BIM still being very unfortunate in terms of vertical, but this is where we're starting to think about, you know, potable pipe, renewal forecasting, bringing the data in and be able to forecast and ask what if. I think that's really important, starting to put that net present value. So starting to bring not just that virtualization, but starting to do some stuff in terms of that data comparison as well. Do you want to just fast forward a bit? Yeah, it's just okay. It's some of the basic stuff they're doing, the housing and that sort of thing, but it does come on in a second. Now, it comes on. One of the big things they were starting to do was to start to think about asset management systems. We often think in terms of FM, but they were starting to think about both, you know, scenario planning as well, bringing all this data in and doing some smart stuff in terms of, you can start to see in terms of, if anybody's here from Rival, there's many, many different vendors there, just for reference purposes. But you start to see it bring into, the, if you like, this asset management system and start to think about very much that what if scenario planning. I just want to, it comes on a second again. So they're starting to use it for condition surveys. You'll see in a second. Just fast forward a wee bit here. So starting to do some stuff, you know, this is a client that's doing this as well. You know, it's not a contractor, a consultant, it's a client, you know, starting to bring it in, starting to do some stuff out in the field in terms of condition surveys. And I thought this was great. You go out there, they're doing all the augmented reality in terms of their, you know, their buried services now, in terms of not just actually the what if, in terms of not net present value, but you can imagine again, if they do have any seismic waves, there's some damage, it becomes easier to find and repair. And you go back to the PowerPoint, but it just shows now in terms of this global journey we're all in with BIM. You know, clients starting to do some really good stuff in terms of what we're doing. And I think if anything, you look back in that last 4 years, this thing called BIM's really kind of, you know, held a mirror against us as an industry. I think we've realised a few things. You know, we've been talking about these ills since the Simon report way back in the 40s, you know, that clients, you know, haven't had that leadership. We've had very poor procurement. It's been adversarial in nature. And I think what we're starting to see is at last, you know, we're generally starting to think about an asset life cycle. I think we're starting to think more collaboratively. And I think we're starting to think about more and more about design management on a more consistent basis. And, you know, it's still these fundamentals that are really important to us. You know, we've really got to hold that mirror up and look at change. Some of the graphics have dropped out, but I think, when we started the journey, it was very much up at the top. We all fought within our domains, be it client, an architect, an engineer. I think we all know we're kind of siloed. And I think the thing about data, it was kind of infrequent. It was unvalidated. And I think the connections are few. I mean, you look at the connections we've now got in terms of a typical project, the number of models. But I think that's the big thing. I think we've got more unified purpose in terms of what we're doing. I think we all know what the project goals are. I think we're better at trying to articulate that. I think we're also trying to create an industry that is much more diverse in nature. Look at the jobs. I think we've tried to rebrand construction a fair bit, call it construction 2.0, but we're starting to see people coming in terms of computer science, got careers, data analytics. It's becoming a big part of what we do now. So for young people, I think construction is looking much more, innovative, technologically advanced. There's new jobs to be had there for that computer scientist. People that are writing advanced analytics and such like, in terms of what we're doing. And I think, you look around the world, this is an Italian newspaper, Il Sole 24, that we're talking about, all the different countries. And again, the UK in the spotlight, seem to be leading in this. And this is the BIM for EU, 28 member states, 15 of them there, talking about, again, better conversation, about trying to harmonise what we do, better technical standards, about working together in terms of what we're doing. And I think this is really quite important, because there's probably two things. Number one, we're starting to see more and more task groups starting to appear around the world, be it in Germany with EMEA and such like. Again, with new challenges, and again, starting to think about some of the concerns within the supply chain. But at the same time as well, we're starting to think in terms of that longer term, these international standards. And ISO 19650, anybody heard of it at all? Anybody? No? Okay. ISO 19650, I'm telling something new, this is good actually. Something new, ISO 19650, it should be available around about 2017, and that will be very much based, or the backbone of it, in the UK standards, especially PAS 1192, Part 2 and Part 3, and looking at how we manage that whole life process for data. So what we're doing in the UK, I think it's starting to very much filter out, and for groups such as that EU BIM working group, we're trying to make it happen. We also hear everywhere you go about this thing called BIM, big data sort of thing. And I don't know what it really means. Is it something you measure in bite size or such like? Maybe a C60 tape to C90, whatever. But I think the big thing for us in our journey has been more about open data. Open data is really, really important. In terms of governments around the world, it's given transparency. I think it's also starting to create some real ingenuity and innovation within the supply chain in terms of what we're doing. But the big part, you look at our industry, it's 90-odd% SME marketplace. It lets everybody play its part, So whilst IFC, Kobe can be difficult at times, it's really important. It can be validated. It lets everybody play, and it helps us in terms of that efficiency and reform. So for us, the open data has been much more important, I think, in terms of big data. You start to see it everywhere now. The SketchUp open source, that 3D printable house. I think we'll see more and more of open data and trying to do things with it. I think we're also saw the role of the client starting to change as well. You can have the best, if you like, might be contractor, tier 1 designer, whatever, but if the course is not right for it, then you're not going to perform well. We need a client that's going to lay down the right foundations for this digital or virtualized working to happen on as well. And I think we look no further than probably our high speed 2 that's looking in terms of what does a digitized procurement look like. They're going to be buying their data in level 2. It's going to be a key part. It was interesting. I was out in Milan with one of the guys from High Speed John Kirby, and of course he showed this vision. And you start to see the challenges. Starting to lay down concept design, starting to move into construction 2017, and then start to hand over. Way in the future, decades. You start to think about the challenges for them as a client. In terms of data refreshing, the data security piece. And they put this as a question, in terms of their journey plan. You start to think about, procurement, initially all being within this level 2, but for them, it'll be so long, will it actually straddle into what we now recognise as level 3A, the enhanced level 2, and as we go through construction and testing, will we start to go into that full level 3, and by the time we actually hand over, is it a potential that you're starting to think about more and more about social data as well? So we're starting to see the smart client that's thinking not just about buying level 2, but starting to ask about the transitions of what this looks like. So they're buying their data once, and it'll move right the way through from that level 3 to level 4. And you can see some of the questions that they are asking, and they are questions, because I don't think we know the answer to it, but how do you future-proof, the requirements they're buying just now? I mean, what's a train going to look like? What's a station look like, in 2026 from now? You think of it, I mean, last week I think was the date in how many folks remember Back to the Future? Yeah, a few, yeah. I think last week was the date in the car when the future was. That's a bit worrying, What's a train going to look like, about 20 years from now? We've got to define employers' requirements just now. How are people going to think about, real-time data transactions in level 3? And in level 4, how do you start to future-proof that operational requirements? How will it improve that customer experience? Having to start to think about all these things just now. And I think that's about the real intelligent client. And again, there's not many of them around the world. And I think it's the same time, it's also, we've got to look at ourselves and think, actually, what does the intelligent data user look like? And for me, I think that still starts with a foundation piece of level 1 BIM, which is 3 things. Level 1, not level 2, come on, level 1. Come on. Come on. One component at level 1.
Information exchange.
Yep, information exchange and a common data environment. Well done, that was hard work. BS 1192/2007, a common data environment. Anybody know the other one? Anybody doing level 2? No? Take that as a no then. So it's made up of 3 things, if you like. We've got, our common data environment. We've also got design management in terms of BS 7000 Part 4. And we've also got in terms of library management as well within their 3 key components. So we hear people talking about doing level 2 BIM. I mean, the reality is I don't think a lot of folks still even know what level 1 is. So there's a huge piece in terms of awareness. So we've got to make sure we get the smart data users. And for me, that's people that are working in a common data environment. They've got good design management. We've got to get the foundations right in terms of what this looks like. And I still hear this, I think, increasingly from our clients, especially in the private sector. Are they getting any benefits from BIM? We've got to start to think about how we actually get the value. I think we've gone through the stages. We've got some new tools. We've gone through the learning. How do you start to think about transformation? How do you get better outcomes from it? And I think we're at that point, and it's not a conversion to 2D and 3D. For me, that transformation is, when you start to disrupt, when we start to give our clients better value in terms of what we're doing. And I think the big thing, how do you start to turn your data into meaningful insights that you make smart, commercial, risk, or business decisions on? And I think until we get to that point, there's still plenty of work to be done. I think we're also starting to see in terms of, we're starting to learn from our data as well. I mean, how many folk have got one of these things, some degree of sort of Internet of Things in their house now? Has anyone got a Nest? Yeah, has anybody heard of it? Yeah, good, there's a few nods. So you think of that, it's learning from data all the time. You like to lie in your bed that bit longer. On a Saturday morning, up in Scotland, I'm sure Graham, you like it turned up all the way sort of thing to, get you out of that hangover sort of thing that you told me about 10 minutes ago. And it knows Graham's got a hangover and likes to lie in his bed a wee bit longer on Saturday morning sort of thing. Why can't it be the same in terms of, the whole procurement process? We learn from the data. It's become smart in terms of what we're doing, especially, and we've got a session with our BIM for Client group in a couple of weeks to look at this, starting to think about a more automated tendering process, starting to think about a 360-degree data cycle. What does that look like? And then we come back to level 2. I think we all know what level 2 is by now. Anyone to shout out what they think the key components are of level 2? Come on, it's a bit of one. Federated models. Yep. Common data environment, brilliant. Paul, you're tweeting there. Come on, tell me a few. You can do this. Come on, you might know a few. Sorry? It's up on the screen. You can read it. Come on. For me, the key things, you've got, it's defined. You've got a client telling you actually what information they want. We've got a degree of validation. We can transact upon it. And then the big thing, I think, is in some degree, it's the data is in a reusable form as well. You can use it for many, many different things. And I think that's important. So we've got some idea of what level 2 is now, as we start to pull all these things together. And it's made up of, for me, 2 things. We've got a project information model and we've got our asset information model as well. And, I think we've got to see more clients starting to think about organizational requirements and their asset requirements that create this asset information model. And at the same time, I think we're starting to see more and more coming through the supply chain, employers' information requirements that can answer what we call plain language questions that formulate the project information model. So you imagine project information model flowing seamlessly through to that asset information model as well. I take it that's what everybody's doing in the room? Yeah, but yeah, great. And I mean, that's number one, a client that can start to think about organizational information requirements. What are the key bits of data and information that, are going to actually meet your client's objectives? They'll be the same probably for every project, that vanilla layer in terms of what we're doing. We then come down in terms of asset information requirements, AIRs. Starting with the end in mind, what's the data that's going to be needed to maintain that asset? Might go into CAFM, a computer-assisted facilities model. As you saw in terms of that video from New Zealand, it might go into some degree of if you like, an asset management, some scenario-based system as well in what we're doing. And I think we're starting to see more and more coming on the marketplace as well. And hopefully, we're starting to see more EIRs, employers, information requirements, how we wrap it up together, setting out what information is to be delivered and what processes. Starting to think about that codifying of the processes and how information is going to be managed through the project lifecycle. Does anybody know what this is? No? Sorry? Great, someone can read. Well done, well done. Fantastic. See, it's good to know that some folk can actually, as we head towards this digital era, that some folk can actually read the title. But you're right, we often notice that master information delivery man or project, setting out when information exchanges happen, starting to define who's responsible for it, and actually how much information are we going to be buying. I'm not so many of them out in the supply chain. I think we've got to think more and more about how we create these master information delivery plans. And I think as a task group, it's one of the things we want to do. We want to try and get more as we try and create the wraparound bit level too. What does an end-to-end one look like? Is anybody doing any master information delivery plans just now? Well done at the back. I think of it, what different is it before we're doing anyway? Before we turned to BIM, we'd have had the same thing in terms of design deliverables. It might have just said 1 to 50 as opposed to an LOD sort of thing. So hopefully, it's just moving things on in terms of what we're doing. But hopefully, if anything, by now, everybody understands the concept of buying the right amount of data at the right time. As we start to think about the questions we're asking, how much data is needed to answer it. And again, always think of it in terms of something simple like a washing machine. Has anybody bought a washing machine lately? Neville, I'm looking at you. You ever bought a washing machine?
Wife makes me one.
Sexist pig, right? There you go. Yeah. Let's see. Who else is about it? Graham, you're buying a washing machine at some point, have you? Yeah, because you told me you got rid of the mango a couple of years ago. So but you think about buying a washing machine. What sort of questions would you ask? You go into the shop, you go into your local PC World, I think they sell these things. What are the questions you would ask? Yeah. How, what's expected life expectancy of it? Yeah. How much does it cost? How big is it? That's a good question. Actually, that's a really good question. Purpose, is it for, does it clean for industrial? Is it, for a typical family? So, what is the purpose of it? Any other ones?
It's capacity.
Capacity. Great. Yep. Good quiff.
20-minute cycle.
Yeah. Cycle time.
Energy rating.
Yep. One more for luck.
Water usage.
What's that, sir?
Water usage.
Yep. So you're giving us a load of data. Okay, how much data did the questions shout out were graphical and how much were non-graphical? There's only one question that somebody said, actually, I think it was, how big is it? All the other questions that you asked were non-graphical in nature. You bang a washing machine, you have one graphical question, or probably one. Does it fit within the space, that void I've got for a washing machine? Everything else is going to be in cost, it's going to be performance, it's going to be warranty. So all that metadata is really important. So buying a washing machine, you might have a low level of detail graphically, but you might have a high level of non-graphical information to support your question. So actually understanding level of definition, both the level of detail and level of information is really important. We'll come back to that in a minute. And I like this. This is from Crossrail that showed that, how they'd actually seen the importance going through the asset lifecycle, saying actually at the start of the project, this magenta, the geometrical model was really important, stakeholder analysis, looking at optioneering. But as you started to move into construction stages, all the graphic, all the non-graphical data, specification, cost, and as you start to put warranty data and O&M data, in terms of importance, there's that play off to support whatever questions that you're answering. And I think the thing is, we are all some degree of clients or employers. We step down information, to our manufacturing community, and we've got to think actually when a client asks a question, how do we make sure that we can step it right down, right through the supply chain? Because actually things like the warranty data often comes from the person that's actually manufacturing it. So we've all got to take our role and responsibility as being a good, well-informed employer. And you start to see the typical questions. Here's a Starbucks type one. What if the floor is difficult to maintain? Which are the properties they've got to replace it in? That's a program level plain language question. And you can start to see there, if you go on the task group website, here's the questions. And you can start to see what answers it. Is it geometry, non-graphical, analysis, is it other documentation? So start to think about the questions you'd answer at a design stage, and then what data would start to answer it for you. Here's a nice simple one as well. A plain language question, what's the optimum construction sequence? So your query data might be a bit of data from a 4D model, it might be a program file, it might be a linked report, but think about the plain language questions you would ask as you go through a project. And we've now got, in terms of what does level 2 look like, hopefully everybody can actually shout them out now in unison because everybody's doing level 2. So what sits around the outside of the onion? It just came out a couple of weeks ago. Sorry? The skin. What makes the skin up then, Miles? Come on. If you want to come into it, you want to do some level 2. If I was going to a really good consultant, he'd answer this in a second. PAS, yep, but there's one in particular. What, sorry? Part 5, that's right, which is starting to think about mindful cyber security. So to get into level 2, we've got to make sure that, in terms of part 5, that we're starting to think about the security layer in between it. We come to the next one, which is actually often referred to as soft landings, but it will be a British standard out later in this year, which is BS 5836, which looks at, again, if you like, briefing during that soft landings process. We've got our use cases, we come inside it, and then you can start to see we've got some other tools that sit in there. We've got protocol to put it in a commercial wrapper. We've got our information exchange, COBE. We've got our latest classification system in terms of Uniclass, the digital plan of work, and sitting with inside for capital expenditure, PAS 1192 Part 2, which has been one of the biggest downloads from British Standard. And if I click again, you can see there, same thing, but the companion document, but this time it's for operational life cycle as well. So if anything, please, have a look at think about level 1, but then have a look for these documents. They are the linchpin of the whole level 2 process. And of course, in terms of Innovate UK, there's been money went out to industry to try and create a tool, especially for defining employers' requirements. Hopefully everybody's starting to see it now, maybe had a bit of a go with it. In terms of right at the very beginning, stage 0, being able to start to put information into the model, maybe in terms of the roles that are going to be there, starting to think about that briefing prior to maybe a tender team coming on board in terms of what it looks like, and starting to define tasks and deliverables. And I think the big thing is, how we can export it. So our client, you can set up your template within there, and you can export out very simply your EIR, either as a PDF or as an IFC or a COBE as well. So starting to think very much about the client and put that out to the marketplace. And you can start to see within there how we can split up in terms of level of definition, the level of detail and level of information. So we can decouple them both to get what's appropriate at that moment in time. Sensor, washing machine. And you start to see there, as we're moving on to detailed design, you can see the LOD in terms of that, I think it's a boiler plant, if you're there. It's got an LOD of 5, which is high, and the LI is free. Maybe it's not been procured at that point. You might not have the warranty data on it as well. Just finally, we're moving into, so we're starting to think about this thing called level 3 as well. I think you guys are still moving to level 1, but hey, everyone's at their place, But for me, this is a game changer. Level 2 was doing what we should be doing it digitally, and starting to think about codifying what we're doing. For me, this thing, level 3, is a paradigm shift. The business plans went out for it when it was launched in February this year, and it'll probably take, I think, somebody said to guess, around about 7 years, if you like, to try and get it through these first trial projects in terms of what it looks like. And you can see some of the key things it seeks to do, in terms of life cycle management, focusing on both real-time cost and carbon. It'll leverage the Internet of Things. And the whole thing in terms of service models, that commercialization, it'll be more performance-based and servitized models as well. And it'll be scalable up in terms of that smart cities as well. So you start to see the main pipelines coming through. It'll be that whole culture, commercial and technical. And you can start to see there, we all kind of know that, others do this, be it aviation, be it in terms of Formula One, but, the whole Internet of Things in terms of, anybody got some, Ian, hold your hand up, go on. Put your hand up, go on. Ian's got some data in his hand just now, isn't it? Ian, that's how you stay credible at the top of your game, isn't it? Make smart, well-informed decisions coming from his wearable Internet of Things. That's the eye. But you rely upon performance data, and that's what these things are putting out. How many steps have you walked today? It might be heartbeat. Why can't our assets do exactly the same? You think about more performance-based contracting. And I took this. You look at the Canadian Grand Prix, the typical team. You've got data that's feeding back to the driver, but look what's going back to the team wall as well in terms of torque, power, tire pressure. They're making real use of real-time data. And the question they're asking, that same plain language question, how do I make that car go faster, or how do I make sure it's going to last the entire race? And it's for that virtualization. And I was speaking to a few of the guys, it's also the gamification as well, in terms of what that looks like as well. So for me, I think that's the holy grail in terms of level 3. Improve business performance, so starting to simulate, that whole, how does the business sort of work? And better social outcomes are where that huge business case are. So level 3, a big part of that's going to be very much in terms of performance and that whole telemetry piece as well. We mentioned in terms of high speed 2, you can start to see, if you like, the different levels, 3A, 3B, 3C. So it's starting to build up gradually, and it's relying upon many, many different things. Hence, you think it's taken us maybe 4 years to mobilise for level 2. I think double that in terms of level 3. We're also starting to think about smart grids, smart cities, and we've got the red line up there in terms of before we move into level 4 and the people piece as well. I think this is some of the challenges round about the whole level 3 piece. We need to develop IFC. We've got to think in terms of data provenance as well, and I think that's a huge piece. You think about other things, you buy a ready-made meal, you've got the data provenance, it knows exactly when it was produced, when it was labelled, there'll be a bit of data that's attributed to it. We need to do the same thing. And obviously security around about that as well, but this time coming from, if you like, the sensors as well. And we've got that whole piece there, lots of things to think about in terms of semantic objects and such like there as well. And I think the big part of this, well, I just wanted to put this image because I really liked it, I can't remember what it's about, but I think it was the fact that, level 3 becomes, level 2, if anything's been, deterministic in nature. I think level 3 becomes more as real-time and probabilistic. We can start to look actually into the future, we can run these scenario plans in terms of what we're doing. I put this in as well because I think I just like the word dataism as well. Irrespective of us having the right data and the right things, at the end of the day, we don't all make the right decisions based upon our data, do we? Ian and I have got these great bits of data and within it, but I still think the road back tonight, I might have a curry, I might do something, irrespective of what the data tells me. So our data is really important, but do we always make the right decisions? And I think we should be excited about it. You look at projects just now in terms of, if it goes ahead, the Google headquarters, in terms of how the data is going to create all these, to run all these bits of plant in terms of what we're doing. So I think we've got probably the most exciting time, I think, to be part of this whole thing called the built environment. It's not construction anymore, the whole built environment in terms of what we're doing. So, that's just us. We're 4 years on into a journey plan. I think it'll keep growing and growing. We might not call it BIM in a few years, it'll maybe be virtualization, but I think, the whole journey plan is going to keep growing.